What happens when the richest man in the city comes face to face with the one person who knows his deepest secret? Not a business rival or a former lover, but a waitress he hasn't seen in 15 years. A waitress he once called his best friend. Liam Sterling, the billionaire founder of Sterling Dynamics, had built an empire on a foundation of ice, deliberately forgetting the ambitious, hopeful boy he used to be. But tonight, when he sees Amelia Vance, her hands shaking slightly as she pours his water, that foundation begins to crack. He could save her from her life of struggle with a single word. Instead, he delivers the cruelest cut of all silence. The world of Liam Sterling was one of polished glass, brushed steel and hushed reverence. From the 30th floor window of his office, the city sprawled below, not as a collection of human lives, but as a map of assets and opportunities. At 35, he was the architect of a technological empire, a man who had traded his youth for a staggering net worth and an equally staggering sense of isolation. His days were a metronomic sequence of high-stakes meetings, data analysis, and decisions that could shift markets. His heart, most who knew him would say, was just another asset, cold stored and appreciating in value with every human connection he severed. Tonight was no different. He was on his way to Aurelia, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign, only a reputation. The interior was a symphony of dark wood, muted gold, and lighting so artfully dimmed it made everyone look both beautiful and conspiratorial. Liam was there to close the deal of his career, a $3 billion merger with Thorne Industries. The man sitting opposite him would be Marcus Thorne, a contemporary whose rise had been as ruthless, if not as meteoric as his own. Liam's driver, a stoic man named Arthur, who had been with him for 5 years and had heard maybe 1,000 words from him in total, pulled the obsidian black sedan to the curb. "We're here, Mr. Sterling." Liam didn't reply. He simply adjusted the cuff of his bespoke Italian suit, his gaze fixed on the transaction ahead. The merger wasn't just about money. It was about consolidation, about dominance. It was the final move in a chess game he had been playing for a decade. Marcus Thorne was a necessary, if distasteful, component of that victory. He stepped out of the car, the cool night air doing little to touch the ironclad composure he wore like a second skin. He was greeted not by a clamoring crowd, but by a single discreet doorman who recognized him instantly. "Mr. Sterling, a pleasure. Mr. Thorne is waiting at your usual table." Liam gave a curt nod. His usual table was a secluded booth in the back, offering privacy and a panoramic view of the restaurant's lesser patrons. As he walked through the dining room, conversations dipped and heads turned, not with gawking curiosity, but with the quiet acknowledgement of power. He was a king in his court, and Aurelia was his throne room. Marcus was already there, a shark-like smile plastered on his face. He was dressed as impeccably as Liam, but where Liam's style was one of understated power, Marcus's was a peacock display of wealth, a watch that cost more than a house cufflinks that glittered aggressively. "Liam," Marcus said, standing and extending a hand. His grip was firm, competitive. "Good to see you. Ready to make history. Let's hope the wine is worth the price first." Liam replied, his voice, a low, even baritone that betrayed no emotion. He slid into the plush leather of the booth, his eyes scanning the room with a practiced air of disinterest. Everything was as it should be, perfect, predictable, and sterile. He was comfortable here in this gilded cage where everything and everyone had a price. He was in complete control. A server approached their table. He was a young man, nervous, his hands fumbling slightly with the menus. "Good evening, gentlemen. May I get you started with some water? We have still or sparkling." "Still," Liam said without looking at him. "And for you, sir?" the waiter asked Marcus. Marcus smirked. "Bring the best bottle of red you have, something that costs more than your monthly salary. We're celebrating." The young waiter paled slightly and scurried away. Liam felt a flicker of something, not pity, but annoyance at Marcus's crassness. It was inefficient. True power didn't need to announce itself. But he said nothing. The deal was all that mattered. The people who orbited his world, the drivers, the doormen, the waiters, were merely functional ghosts in the machine of his life. He had trained himself not to see them, not to acknowledge their existence beyond their immediate utility. It was a skill he had perfected over 15 long, lonely years, and it was a skill that was about to be tested in a way he could never have imagined. Amelia Vance hated the Saturday night shift. It was a parade of the city's elite people who dripped condescension as easily as they dripped wine on the pristine white tablecloths. For 6 hours she would become invisible, a pair of hands to clear plates and refill glasses, her identity stripped away and replaced with a starched apron and a forced, weary smile. At 34, this was not the life she had envisioned. Her days were a frantic juggle of 2 jobs, while her nights were spent studying textbooks for a degree she feared she'd never finish. Every dollar she earned was a small victory against the mountain of her mother's medical bills. Tonight her section included the coveted Table 12, the secluded booth in the back. Usually this was a blessing, the tips were astronomical. But tonight it was a curse. The reservation was under the name Sterling. Her manager, a perpetually stressed man named David, had pulled her aside. "Amelia, you have Sterling tonight. That means perfection. No mistakes. Mr. Sterling is our most important client. Do you understand?" "Yes, David," she'd said, her stomach twisting into a knot. She had followed the name Liam Sterling in the business pages for years, a distant, morbid curiosity, compelling her to track the trajectory of the boy she once knew. The awkward, brilliant boy with mismatched socks and a mind that moved faster than light. The boy who had been her other half, her partner in dreaming up impossible futures in his parents' dusty garage. That boy was gone, replaced by a cold-faced titan of industry who stared out from magazine covers with eyes that looked like they'd never known warmth. When the young waiter who had taken their initial drink order came back to the kitchen, his face ashen, he told the other staff, "The guy at table 12, with Sterling, just ordered the 82 Cheval Blanc. He told me to pick something that costs more than my salary." A wave of dread washed over Amelia. She smoothed down her apron, took a deep breath, and picked up her notepad. This was just another table. It didn't matter who he was. It couldn't matter. As she approached the booth, she kept her eyes down her focus on the professional script she recited 100 times a night. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Amelia, and I will be your server this evening. Are you ready to hear about our specials, or would you like another moment?" She risked a glance upwards as she finished, and her breath hitched. It was him. Older, sharper, colder, but unmistakably Liam. The angles of his face were harsher, the light in his eyes extinguished and replaced with a glacial calm. He looked right at her, and for a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. She saw a flicker of something in his eyes, shock recognition, a ghost of the past. It was there, she was sure of it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Liam," she wanted to scream. "It's me. It's Amy." But the moment passed as quickly as it came. His expression became a flat, impenetrable wall. He looked through her as if she were made of glass, as if she was just another part of the decor. The man sitting opposite him? Marcus Thorne didn't even bother to look up from his phone. The rejection was a physical blow, so sharp and sudden it almost made her gasp. He knew it was her, and he chose to pretend he didn't. He chose to humiliate her with his indifference. All the years of wondering, of nursing a dull ache of betrayal, coalesced into a single searing moment of shame. Here she was in her cheap, worn-out shoes, serving the boy who had promised they would conquer the world together. And he didn't even have the decency to acknowledge her existence. She felt the blood drain from her face. Her voice, when she spoke again, was a thin, reedy thing she barely recognized. I'll give you another moment with the menu." She turned and walked away, her legs unsteady. She didn't stop until she reached the relative safety of the kitchen, pushing through the swinging doors and leaning against a cold, stainless steel counter, fighting for breath. The clatter of pots and the shouts of the chefs were a dull roar in her ears. One tear, hot and furious, escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She angrily wiped it away. She would not cry. She would not give him that satisfaction. She was a professional. She would go back out there, serve them their ridiculously expensive wine and their meticulously crafted food, and she would remain invisible. It was, after all, exactly what he wanted. 15 years earlier, the world smelled of soldering irons, cheap pizza, and limitless potential. The headquarters of their future empire was Liam's parents' garage, a cluttered space filled with old lawn furniture and the ghosts of forgotten hobbies. But to Liam and Amelia, or Amy as he'd always called her, it was their laboratory, their launch pad. They were an unlikely pair. Liam, the quiet, intense introvert who could lose himself for hours in complex lines of code, his mind a place of elegant logical structures. Amy, the vibrant, charismatic extrovert who could see the big picture, who could translate Liam's technical genius into a vision that could change the world. They were the two halves of a single brilliant whole. Their shared dream had a name, Project Nova. It was an audacious data compression algorithm they had started developing in their senior year of high school. It was revolutionary, capable of shrinking massive data files to a fraction of their size with no loss of quality. It was their ticket out of their small, dead-end town. "Imagine it, Amy," Liam would say, his eyes shining with a passion she rarely saw outside the garage. "This could revolutionize everything. Data storage, streaming, communications. We could build our own company. No more working for anyone else. Just us." "Sterling and Vance," she'd reply, grinning as she doodled a logo on a pizza box. "Has a nice ring to it. Don't you think we'll be bigger than Microsoft?" Their bond was forged in late nights, fueled by caffeine and a shared, fervent belief in each other. He was the only one who didn't see her as just a popular girl. He saw her intellect, her drive, and she was the one who could draw him out of his shell, who understood the silent language of his work. It was more than friendship. It was a partnership of souls. Lurking on the periphery of their world was Marcus Thorne. His father was a wealthy local businessman, and Marcus carried himself with an unearned air of superiority. He was in their advanced computer science class, but lacked Liam's innate talent, a fact that gnawed at him. He saw the magic happening in that garage and was consumed with envy, not just for the project, but for the effortless synergy between Liam and Amy. "Still playing with your little toys in the garage?" Marcus would sneer at Liam in the school hallway. "My dad's already got me an internship lined up at a real tech company." Liam would just ignore him, but Amy saw the flicker of insecurity in his eyes. She would always step in. "We're not playing, Marcus. We're building something. Something you wouldn't understand." The final summer before they were all meant to go off to different colleges, Liam to MIT on a full scholarship, Amy to Stanford for business, was the summer everything was supposed to come together. They had a working prototype of Nova. Amy had even managed to get them a meeting with a small venture capital firm in the city. The night before the meeting, they sat in the garage, the final lines of code compiling on the screen. The air was thick with anticipation. "Are you scared?" Amy asked softly. Liam looked away from the monitor, his gaze meeting hers. "Only of letting you down." "You could never let me down," she said, her voice full of a conviction that felt as solid as the ground beneath them. But she was wrong. The next morning, Liam was gone. His parents said he'd left a note that he'd taken an early bus to Boston and wasn't coming back. The note, which his mother tearfully showed her, said only that he'd gotten a better offer, a solo opportunity he couldn't pass up, and that Project Nova was a dead end. He hadn't even said goodbye. The venture capital meeting came and went. Amy sat in the lobby alone, her carefully prepared presentation feeling like a book of fairy tales. A few days later, Marcus had found her. He had that familiar, smug look on his face. "Heard your partner flew the coop," he'd said. Smartest thing he ever did. "He told me that algorithm of yours was full of bugs. He knew it was worthless. He just used you to get his scholarship application noticed." The betrayal was absolute, a clean, devastating cut that had severed her belief in partnership, in friendship, in shared dreams. She had packed up her life for Stanford, leaving the garage and Project Nova behind like a painful, childish fantasy. She never saw Liam again, until tonight. Amelia returned to the table, her composure rebuilt into a fragile wall of professionalism. She carried the obscenely expensive bottle of wine as if it were a bomb, her hands steady despite the tremor in her heart. She performed the ritual, presenting the bottle, uncorking it, pouring a small amount for Marcus to taste. Marcus swirled the deep red liquid in his glass, inhaled its aroma with an exaggerated flourish, and took a sip. "Acceptable," he declared, waving a dismissive hand for her to pour. Liam hadn't said a word. He stared into the middle distance, his jaw tight. Was he thinking about the garage, about their shared dreams, or was he simply annoyed that this inconvenient ghost from his past had materialized to serve him? As Amelia filled Liam's glass, her hand brushed his for a fleeting moment. It was like touching a marble statue, cold, hard, and lifeless. He didn't flinch, didn't react at all. "So," Marcus began, leaning forward conspiratorially after Amelia had retreated a safe distance. "This merger, it's not just about market share, Liam. It's a statement. It's about showing everyone who the true innovators are. Not all of us are destined for greatness, you know. Some people peak in high school. They have these big dreams, think they're going to change the world from their parents' garage, and then... Well," he gestured vaguely in Amelia's direction with his wine glass. "They end up pouring the wine for the people who actually did it." Liam's expression remained unreadable. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his wine, his eyes fixed on Marcus. "The projections are what matter, Marcus. Let's stick to the numbers." The comment was a clear dismissal, yet it did nothing to defend her. Liam's silence was a form of consent, a quiet affirmation of Marcus's cruelty. To Amelia, standing by the service station, his words were like daggers. "He's talking about me. And Liam is letting him." The dinner was an agonizing ordeal. Every time Amelia had to approach the table to refill water glasses or clear plates, Marcus would find a new way to twist the knife. "It's a shame, really," Marcus mused, cutting into a piece of steak. "Potential is a tricky thing. Some people just don't have the stomach for the fight. They're content to live small lives to serve. It's a necessary role, I suppose. Someone has to clear the plates." Each word was aimed at Liam, but its shrapnel was meant for her. Amelia's hands clenched at her sides. She focused on the tablecloth, on the precise alignment of the silverware, on anything but the two men at the table. She could feel Liam's gaze on her, but it wasn't one of sympathy. It was cold, analytical. Was he studying her, judging her? Was he congratulating himself on his decision to abandon her all those years ago? Internally, Liam was a tempest. Seeing Amy Amelia, he corrected himself, had thrown his carefully ordered world into chaos. She was the one loose end he had never managed to tie up, the one person who represented the past he had worked so hard to obliterate. Marcus's taunts were grating, but they also reinforced the narrative Liam had told himself for 15 years that Amy had betrayed him. Marcus had been the one to tell him back then that Amy had tried to sell their Nova algorithm to a rival company behind his back. The news had shattered him, confirming his deepest fears that he was alone, that he could trust no one. It was that belief, that core wound, that had fueled his ruthless ascent. He had cut her out of his life like a surgeon removing a tumor. Seeing her now struggling and worn down felt like a grim, painful validation of his choice. He had to be cold. He had to be detached. The deal was everything. "Tell me," Marcus said, looking directly at Amelia as she refilled his water, "what does a woman like you dream about at night? Getting a big tip, maybe one day being promoted to manager." Amelia's spine stiffened. She kept her eyes down her voice, a low professional monotone. "Is there anything else I can get for you, sir?" "No," Marcus sneered. "You've provided quite enough entertainment for one evening." She retreated, her cheeks burning with a humiliation so profound it felt like a fever. She glanced at Liam one last time. He was looking down at the deal prospectus on the table, his face a mask of utter indifference. His silence wasn't just a dagger anymore. It was the twisting of that dagger in an old, unhealed wound. The main course was finished, the plates cleared away in a tense silence. Amelia's movements were now robotic, a desperate attempt to create a shield of professionalism around her splintering emotions. She only had to get through dessert, through the coffee, through the signing of a check, and then she could collapse. She approached the table, carrying a silver tray with a water pitcher and 2 fresh glasses. Her mind was a chaotic storm of past and present, the echo of Liam's laughter in the garage, the sneer on Marcus's face, the mounting pile of bills on her kitchen counter. She was so lost in the vortex of her thoughts that she didn't notice the leg of a chair from an adjacent table sticking out slightly into the aisle. Her foot caught. In a horrifying moment of slow motion, the tray tilted. The pitcher slid, and a cascade of ice-cold water splashed across the table, landing directly in Marcus Thorne's lap. A collective gasp went through the nearby tables. For a moment, there was dead silence. Marcus looked down at his drenched $1,000 trousers as if he'd been shot. Then his face contorted into a mask of pure fury. "You clumsy, incompetent fool!" he roared, jumping to his feet. The entire restaurant's attention was now fixed on their table. "Do you have any idea what these pants cost? This is a disaster. I'm so sorry, sir." Amelia stammered, her face crimson. "It was an accident. I tripped." "An accident?" Marcus scoffed, his voice dripping with venom. "An accident is spilling a drop of wine. This is gross negligence. I want to speak to your manager. Now I will have you fired for this. People like you don't belong in a place like this." Amelia stood frozen, the empty pitcher still in her hand, the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on her. She felt smaller than she had ever felt in her life. She looked to Liam, a desperate, silent plea in her eyes. "Say something. Please. Anything." Liam watched the scene unfold with an unnerving stillness. His face was a blank slate, his posture rigid. He didn't look at Marcus, he looked at Amelia. And in that moment she saw not a flicker of support, Not a hint of their shared history, not even a shred of basic human decency. She saw only a cold, silent judgment. His silence was his verdict. You are not my problem. You are nothing to me. And that was it. That was the final straw. The thread of her composure stretched taut. Over 15 years of hardship and heartache finally snapped. The fear, the shame, the humiliation, it all vanished, burned away by a sudden, white-hot surge of anger. An anger at Marcus, for his cruelty, at Liam, for his betrayal, and at herself, for ever believing he was someone worth missing. The restaurant manager, David, was rushing over his face, pale with panic. "Mr. Thorne, I am so terribly sorry. We will take care of everything." But Amelia held up a hand, stopping him. She placed the pitcher down on the tray, with a soft, deliberate click. She straightened her back, and when she looked at Marcus, her eyes were no longer downcast and apologetic. They were clear and steady, blazing with a fire that had been dormant for far too long. "No," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying an astonishing weight that cut through the silence. "Don't apologize for me, David." She turned her attention from Marcus, dismissing him as if he were an annoying insect, and fixed her gaze directly on Liam. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. "You know," she began, her voice gaining strength with every word, "for a man who built an empire on predicting outcomes, you have one hell of a blind spot, Leo." The use of his childhood nickname, a name no one had called him in 15 years, hit Liam like a physical jolt. His mask of indifference finally cracked, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Amelia wasn't finished. The dam had broken, and 15 years of unspoken words came flooding out. "You sit here in your perfect suit, in your perfect restaurant, making deals worth more than a small country, and you think this makes you a man of vision. But you can't even see the truth when it's pouring you a glass of water." "What is she talking about?" Marcus demanded, looking back and forth between them. "Leo, what is this nonsense?" Amelia ignored him. Her universe had narrowed to the space between herself and the man in the booth, the ghost she had once called her best friend. "We had something, you and I," she said, her voice now resonating with a raw, aching power. It was built in a garage, not a boardroom. It was called Project Nova. Do you even remember the name Liam? Or did you file it away with all the other inconvenient parts of your past? Liam was speechless. He stared at her, the blood draining from his face. The name Project Nova was a key to a locked room in his memory, a room he had bricked up and tried to forget. "You left," Amelia continued, her voice trembling not with weakness, but with the force of her conviction. "No goodbye, no explanation. Just a note saying it was a dead end and you'd gotten a better offer. You let me believe for 15 years that you threw me away, that you threw us away for nothing." She then turned her fiery gaze on Marcus Thorne. "And you? You were there, weren't you, always lurking, always watching? You came to me after he left. You told me Liam thought the algorithm was worthless. You told me he used me." "This is absurd," Marcus blustered, dabbing at his trousers with a napkin. "The woman is clearly hysterical. She should be removed." "Am I?" Amelia challenged, a bitter smile touching her lips. "Funny how some things have a way of sticking around. Mementos of a past you think you've buried." From the small pocket of her apron, she pulled out a folded, yellowed piece of paper. It was worn at the creases, soft as cloth, from years of being kept. She unfolded it carefully. "I found this in my old locker a week after you vanished, Liam," she said, her eyes locked on his. "It must have slipped through the vents from the locker next to mine." "Your locker?" She looked at Marcus. I believe this is your handwriting." She held it up. It was a handwritten letter, the ink slightly faded. "I don't need to read it aloud," Amelia said, her voice dropping to an intense, almost conspiratorial whisper. "But I'm sure you both remember what it says. It's a note from you, Marcus, to Liam. An offer." Liam's eyes widened in horror as a fractured memory surfaced a conversation, a proposition he'd dismissed at the time. Amelia's voice filled in the blanks for the captivated restaurant. "It was an offer to cut me out. You, Marcus, would use your father's connections to get funding for Nova, but only if Liam got rid of me. The dead weight, as you so charmingly put it. You told him I was planning to sell the code to a competitor, didn't you? You manufactured a lie to poison him against me because you were jealous. You couldn't create what we had, so you decided to destroy it." She laid the letter on the table between them. "He turned you down, Liam." "I know he did. The boy I knew would never have agreed to that. Which means you didn't leave because you betrayed me. You left because you thought I had betrayed you. You believed his lie. You let this snake whisper poison in your ear, and you ran. You ran from the one person in the world who had your back." The silence in the restaurant was absolute, the truth of her words backed by the damning physical evidence of the letter hung in the air, iridescent and terrible, the carefully constructed world of Liam Sterling, his entire justification for the cold, empty man he had become, was built on a 15-year-old lie. And it was all unraveling under the fluorescent lights of a restaurant kitchen at the hands of the woman he had thrown away. The yellowed letter on the pristine white tablecloth was more devastating than any corporate sabotage Liam had ever faced. It was a bomb that had detonated in the center of his soul, and the blast was tearing through 15 years of his life, leveling everything he thought he knew. Marcus's lie. The words echoed in his mind, rearranging the past into a new, horrifying mosaic. He remembered Marcus pulling him aside, his voice slick with false concern. "Man, you've got to be careful. I overheard Amy on the phone. She's shopping Nova around. I think she's going to sell you out." He remembered the cold dread that had seized him, a feeling so potent it had felt like truth. He had been a scholarship kid, insecure and terrified of failure. The thought that Amy, his partner, his best friend, would betray him had been his worst nightmare made real. So he had run. He had run to MIT, buried himself in work, and used that phantom betrayal as fuel hardening his heart until it was impenetrable. And it was all a lie. He looked from the letter to Marcus, whose face had turned a pasty, sickly white. The bravado, the sneering superiority, it had all evaporated, leaving behind a pathetic, cornered coward. Then Liam looked at Amelia. He truly saw her for the first time that night. Not as a waitress, not as a ghost from his past, but as Amy. He saw the weariness in her eyes, the lines of hardship etched around her mouth, and he understood with gut-wrenching clarity that he was responsible for it. He had left her to face the world alone, armed with a lie. While he was building an empire on a foundation of bitterness and distrust, she was struggling, fighting, surviving. The $3 billion deal, the merger, the market dominance, it all turned to ash in his mouth. What was the point of conquering a world you had to live in all alone? With a calm that was more terrifying than any outburst, Liam slowly folded his napkin and placed it on the table. He picked up the letter, his fingers tracing the faded ink. He turned his gaze to Marcus. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, devoid of all emotion, and as sharp as a shard of glass. "The deal is off, Marcus," Marcus stammered. "Liam, wait. Let's not be hasty. This is just some misunderstanding from when we were kids." "There is no misunderstanding," Liam said, his eyes like chips of ice. "You built your career on a stolen premise and a lie. Our potential partnership is terminated effective immediately." He paused, letting the words hang in the dead air. "Furthermore, my legal team will be in touch first thing Monday morning. We'll be discussing intellectual property theft dating back 15 years. I kept every line of code from Project Nova. Every single one." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. "You can't," Marcus whispered, his face crumbling. "Get out of my sight," Liam commanded, his voice low but carrying the undeniable weight of absolute power. Marcus, utterly defeated, stumbled back from the table. He gave Amelia a look of pure hatred before practically fleeing the restaurant, a disgraced king exiled from the court. The room was still. The other patrons averted their eyes, pretending to be absorbed in their meals, but the silence was electric. It was just Liam and Amelia alone in the wreckage. The king was back on his throne, but the throne room felt like a tomb. He had won. He had vanquished his enemy. But all he felt was the hollow, cavernous echo of a 15-year-old mistake. He had built an empire of regret, and he was its sole lonely inhabitant. With Marcus gone, a fragile, heavy silence descended upon the table. The curious stares of the other diners felt like physical weights. David, the manager, hovered nearby, unsure of how to proceed. Liam gave him a short, sharp gesture, a wave of dismissal, and David quickly retreated, shooing the other staff away. Liam was left alone with Amelia, the woman who held the shattered pieces of his past in her hands. He looked at her at the proud set of her jaw and the defiant hurt in her eyes, and the glib, powerful CEO vanished, leaving behind only the awkward, guilt-ridden boy from the garage. "Amy." He began the name, feeling foreign and clumsy on his tongue after so long. I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say, Liam," she said, her voice weary. The fire was gone, replaced by a deep, resonant exhaustion. She began to turn away, to retreat back to the invisibility of her job. "No, wait." He said, the words coming out faster, more desperately than he intended. "Please, don't go." She stopped but didn't look at him. "The table's been cleared. My shift is almost over. I have to go." He fumbled inside his jacket and pulled out his checkbook and a pen, the familiar tools of his world. It was a reflexive action, the only way he knew how to solve problems. He scribbled furiously, not even looking at the numbers, and tore out the check. He pushed it across the table towards her. "Here," he said. "This can help. With your mother, with school, with whatever you need. Let me fix this." Amelia finally turned to look at him. She glanced down at the check in his outstretched hand. It was for an amount so large it seemed unreal, a number with enough zeros to change her life completely. For a fleeting second, she imagined it. Her mother's medical debt erased no more double shifts, a future free from the constant grinding anxiety of poverty. Then she looked back up at his face, at his earnest, pleading expression, and she felt a fresh wave of disappointment. After everything, he still didn't get it. He still thought money was the answer. He thought he could buy her forgiveness, write a check to absolve himself of 15 years of neglect and disbelief. Slowly, deliberately, she shook her head. "I don't want your money, Liam," she said, her voice soft but firm. He was stunned. "But this would solve everything." "No," she replied, a sad smile touching her lips. "It would solve my problems. It wouldn't solve yours." She pushed the check back across the table towards him. "I'm not one of your business deals to be settled with a payment. I'm not a problem for you to fix with your checkbook." She took a deep breath, the last of her strength going into her final words. "I was your friend. The person who believed in you before Sterling Dynamics ever existed. and you threw that away because you chose to believe a lie. A check can't fix that. Nothing can." Without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing through the swinging doors of the kitchen, leaving Liam Sterling, the billionaire titan, utterly alone at his table with nothing but a worthless piece of paper and the crushing weight of his colossal mistake. The money, the power, the empire, it all meant nothing. He had lost the one thing he could never buy back. A week passed. It was the longest week of Liam's life. He didn't go into the office. He cancelled his meetings, ignored hundreds of frantic calls from his board, and silenced the news alerts detailing the spectacular implosion of Thorn Industries. He just sat in his sterile, silent penthouse, the city lights twinkling below like a galaxy he had no right to be a part of. The check he had tried to give Amelia sat on his marble countertop, a constant mocking reminder of his failure. He had replayed that night at the restaurant 1,000 times, each replay more painful than the last. She was right. He had tried to solve a problem of the heart with an algorithm of the wallet. It was the only way he knew how to operate anymore. He realized he had to do something different, something real. He spent 2 days, not with his financial advisors, but with a private investigator, tracking down every detail of Amelia's life. The report he received was a testament to her strength and his shame. The 2 jobs, the night classes for a nursing degree, the crushing debt from her mother's long and difficult illness. She had been fighting a war while he'd been playing a game. On the 8th day, he finally left his penthouse. He wasn't wearing a bespoke suit, but a simple pair of jeans and a plain grey sweater, an echo of the boy he used to be. He didn't take his driver. He drove himself his high-end sports car, looking comically out of place as he pulled up to her run-down apartment building in a part of the city he hadn't visited in years. He found her apartment number and knocked his heart pounding with a nervous energy he hadn't felt since before his first big pitch. When she opened the door, she was in sweatpants, her hair tied up in a messy bun. She looked tired, but when she saw him, her eyes widened in wary surprise. "Liam, what are you doing here?" "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice quiet. She hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to let him into her small, clean, but clearly struggling apartment. It was filled with books and photos of her mother. It felt more like a home than his entire penthouse. He didn't offer apologies or excuses. Instead, he handed her a thick, bound folder. "What's this?" she asked. "It's a business plan," he said. "I've been working on it all week." She opened it. The title on the cover page read, Nova 2.0. Her breath caught. Inside was a meticulously detailed proposal. It wasn't just an idea. It was a fully fledged plan to resurrect their old project updated for the modern world. There were market analyses, funding structures, and technical specifications. He had started a new company, a subsidiary of Sterling Dynamics, but one that would operate independently. He had already secured the seed funding $50 million. She flipped to the last page, the corporate registration documents, and there, under the list of company officers, she saw 2 names, Liam Sterling, co-founder and chief technology officer, Amelia Vance, co-founder and chief executive officer. Her shares were listed as 50%, an equal partner. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Liam, I can't accept this." "It's not a gift, Amy," he said, his voice thick with an emotion she hadn't heard from him in 15 years. "And it's not a handout. It's an apology. And it's a correction. This is what should have happened 15 years ago. Project Nova was always yours as much as it was mine. Your vision, my code. It was never going to work without both of us." He took a step closer. "I spent my life building an empire out of fear and anger. It's empty. It means nothing without people to share it with. I don't know if I can fix what I broke between us. but I want to try. I need my partner back. Not just for the business. I need my best friend back, to help me remember how to be human again." Amelia looked from the proposal in her hands to the man standing before her. He was no longer the cold billionaire from the restaurant or the ghost of a boy from her memory. He was just Liam, vulnerable and asking for a second chance. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with the shadows of the past. But for the first time in a very long time, the future didn't look like a struggle. It looked like a possibility. It looked like the dawn. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but this time it wasn't one of sorrow. It was one of hope. "Okay, Leo," she whispered, a small, genuine smile finally returning to her face. "Okay, let's get to work." 1 year later, the offices of Nova Systems looked nothing like the cold, imposing tower of Sterling Dynamics. Located in a refurbished brick warehouse in the city's burgeoning tech district, the space was a testament to a different kind of empire. Glass walls were covered not in stock tickers, but in a chaotic rainbow of marker ink, detailing complex algorithms and ambitious launch plans. Sunlight streamed through massive industrial windows, illuminating open-concept workspaces where young, brilliant minds collaborated with an energetic buzz. There were plants, comfortable couches, and a state-of-the-art coffee machine that Amelia insisted was the company's most important asset. This was the empire they had built together, not an empire of regret, but one of trust. Amelia Vance. CEO moved through the space with an air of quiet, confident authority. The tired, worn-down waitress was a distant memory. Today she was dressed in a sharp, stylish blazer, her expression focused as she led a team through a product demonstration. Her mother, having received the best medical care in the country, was now in stable remission, her medical debts a forgotten nightmare. Amelia's energy was no longer consumed by survival. It was channeled into creation. The compression rate is stable at 92%, but the latency spikes on the mobile-to-cloud sync, she said, pointing to a graph on a large monitor. We need to get that down by another 50 milliseconds before the beta launch. What are our options? She didn't provide the answers. She guided her team to find them a skill she had honed, not in a boardroom, but by navigating a lifetime of challenges. Across the room, Liam Sterling, CTO, was huddled with a group of junior coders, his sleeves rolled up a pen tucked behind his ear. The change in him was even more profound. The glacial wall of his composure had melted, replaced by an approachable intensity. He still possessed the same laser focus and genius that had built Sterling Dynamics, but it was now tempered with patience and a genuine collaborative spirit. He laughed at a joke. One of the coders made a real, unforced sound that had been absent from his life for 15 years. He had not abandoned Sterling Dynamics. He had installed a new CEO and now served as a hands-off chairman of the board. His real work, his passion was here at Nova. He had found to his astonishment that he was a better leader when he wasn't trying to be a king on a lonely throne. Later that evening, long after the last employee had gone home, the two of them stood in their shared office, a corner space with a panoramic view of the city skyline. They were looking over the final press release for the official launch of the Nova platform. A revolutionary algorithm set to redefine data transfer for the next generation. Amelia read aloud, a small smile playing on her lips. It sounds a lot better than a little project we started in your parents' garage. Liam leaned back against the desk, looking at her. We should have put that in. It's more accurate. He paused, his expression turning serious. Are you ready for this? Once this goes live, everything changes. It already has, Liam, she said softly. Look at us. Look at this place. She gestured around the quiet office, at the white boards filled with their shared dreams. "This is what we talked about all those years ago. It's real." He nodded, a profound sense of peace settling over him. For so long he had viewed this same skyline as a battlefield, a series of assets to be conquered and controlled. Now, looking out at the endless points of light, he saw something different. He saw a network of people, of homes and businesses, that their creation would soon connect in a new way. "I still have nightmares about that night at the restaurant," he confessed, his voice low. "The look on your face, the way I just sat there." Amelia came and stood beside him, her shoulder lightly touching his. "I think about it too," she admitted. "But I also think about the day you showed up at my apartment. You didn't try to buy your way out of the past. You offered to build a future. That was the day that mattered." He finally looked away from the window and met her gaze. The deep, unwavering trust in her eyes was more valuable to him than his entire fortune. It was the one thing he had truly earned. "We finally got it right, Amy." He said the name flowing as naturally as it had when they were kids. She smiled, a bright, beautiful thing that lit up her whole face. "We were always going to," she replied. "It just took a little longer than we planned." Together they turned back to the window partners, in every sense of the word, watching the city lights glitter below. No longer a gilded cage or a battlefield, but a world of infinite possibility waiting for the dawn. Their dawn. Liam and Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that our past never truly leaves us. The choices we make and the lies we believe can shape our entire lives. But it also shows that it's never too late for redemption, for truth, and for a second chance at a dream you thought was long dead. True wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the connections we fight to keep and the forgiveness we have the courage to offer. Can a friendship shattered by deceit truly be rebuilt into something stronger? What do you think? If this story of regret and reunion moved you, please hit that like button to let us know. Don't forget to share it with someone who loves a powerful story, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more content that makes you think. Click that notification bell so you never miss what happens next.